Harley Grant tugged her coat tighter around her body, but the wind still sliced through like glass, and her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper cup of coffee. She hadn't expected the temperature to drop this fast, and of course, her coat had one broken button and a fraying liner. She'd been rushing between interviews all day, 3 rejections in a row, and now, standing outside the Bryant Park subway entrance waiting for her train, she was starting to lose feeling in her toes. Then a man stepped out of a sleek black car, the kind that didn't belong anywhere near this part of the city unless someone rich was lost. His driver barely had time to close the door before the man spotted her. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, his voice deep and clear despite the wind. Harley blinked at him. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ends under his wool scarf. His jawline was sharp, his suit clearly expensive, and he looked out of place in the icy gray sidewalk scene, like he'd walked out of a luxury magazine. "I'm fine," she answered, though her voice came out hoarse. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing as he took in her shivering frame. Without a word, he started unbuttoning his coat. "What are you doing?" she asked, startled. "Giving you my coat," he said simply. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm not," she said, though her knees wobbled as she said it. He didn't wait. He draped the heavy, warm coat over her shoulders and adjusted it around her carefully. The scent of his cologne, clean, woodsy, expensive, hit her immediately, and her body nearly sagged under the sudden comfort. "I can't take this," she protested. "You'll freeze." "I'm not staying out here," he said, flashing a quick, crooked smile. "My car's warm, but you—" He hesitated. His eyes were scanning her face now, and something shifted in his expression, as if he'd seen something in her he hadn't expected. "I'm Harris Pierce," he added, holding out a hand. Harley blinked again. "You're serious?" "Yeah, and you are." Harley Grant," he nodded slowly. "Nice to meet you, Harley." She didn't tell him she recognized the name, that she'd read about him in Forbes 2 months ago. Harris Pierce, billionaire CEO of Pierce Innovations, one of the country's youngest tech giants. She never imagined she'd meet him on a freezing sidewalk, let alone be wearing his coat. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. "No, just the subway." He glanced toward the entrance. "You'll freeze before it shows. Let me give you a ride." She hesitated. "I don't know you." "True," he said. "But I just gave you a coat that cost more than most rent. I'm not going to kill you." She laughed despite herself. "That's not exactly reassuring." He held up his hands. "Fair, but look, I'll drop you wherever you want to go, no strings." She studied him. His eyes were steady, not pushy, not flirtatious, just warm, honest. "Okay," she said finally, "but only if you're sure." "Absolutely." The inside of the car was like a heated cocoon, leather seats, a silent driver, smooth jazz humming from invisible speakers. "You're not from around here?" he asked as the car pulled into traffic. "I live in Queens," she said, "but I've been in Manhattan all day, job hunting." "Anything specific?" "Marketing, branding. I'm trying to break into creative direction, but I keep running into the 'you need 5 years experience to get experience' thing." He nodded. "Yeah, that system's broken." She glanced at him. "You know something about hiring?" He gave her a sideways look, amused. "A little," she smirked. "Right. You're Harris Pierce. You probably have 5 assistants and a private chef." 3 assistants, no chef. I can cook." Harley laughed. "Of course you can." He grinned at her, then turned serious. "Look, I know you don't know me, and this is probably the weirdest thing that's happened to you all week, but it is," she said. "By far. But I like people who aren't afraid to be honest. You're not pretending, and I appreciate that." She tilted her head. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying, I'd like to see you again." Harley blinked. "Like, on purpose?" He burst out laughing. "Yes, on purpose. Dinner, coffee, or maybe you could let me take you to a real coat store." She looked down at the coat still wrapped around her. It felt like a hug. Like safety, she hadn't felt that in a long time. "I don't know," she said quietly. "You're you, and you're you," he said gently. "And I like you." She met his eyes. There was no arrogance in them, just sincerity. "Okay," she said, suddenly breathless. "One coffee?" "Deal." He asked for the address, and she gave it. When they got there, he walked her to her door, handed her a business card, and said, "Keep the coat. I'll get it back when I see you again." She stared at the card after he left. His name, his personal number, no assistant. No middleman, just him. Harley closed the door and leaned against it, heart thudding. She had no idea what just happened, but she knew one thing: that man was going to change her life. 3 days later, Harley stood in front of the full-length mirror inside a boutique she had only dared to walk past before. The lighting was soft, the walls ivory, and the woman adjusting a belt around Harley's waist wore all black and a name tag that read, Sophia Personal Stylist. Harley didn't know what felt more surreal, being here, or the fact that Harris Pierce was sitting just outside the fitting room with a cappuccino in one hand and his phone in the other, waiting for her opinion. "This is insane," she whispered to Sophia, tugging at the satin sleeve of the dress. "I'm just supposed to walk out there and act normal." "You're not stealing it, sweetheart," Sophia said smoothly. "The man asked for a private appointment. That's not something we offer unless someone spent 6 figures in the last quarter." Harley's stomach turned. "He's buying this," Sophia arched a brow. "He already did. But we haven't even— You're not the first woman he's dressed. But you're the first I've seen him wait for." Harley's heart gave a strange thud at that. She turned back to the mirror, not sure what to do with the image staring back a woman who looked nothing like the one who'd been scouring job boards and eating instant noodles for dinner a week ago. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's get this over with." She stepped out, trying not to wobble in the heels. The boutique was silent except for the soft hum of jazz, and Harris looked up the second she stepped into view. His expression changed instantly. The phone was forgotten. He stood slowly, like someone seeing a storm roll in, not with fear but with complete focus. "Say something," Harley muttered, crossing her arms. "You look like you own the city," he said. She laughed, abrupt and disbelieving. "That's dramatic." "I'm dramatic," he said plainly. "And I don't say things unless I mean them." She looked away, her cheeks warming. "I can't let you keep buying me things." "You didn't let me," he replied. "I volunteered." "But why?" she asked, finally meeting his eyes. "You don't even know me." Something unreadable flickered in his gaze. He stepped closer, his tone quiet but firm. "Because the world doesn't make room for people like you unless someone kicks the door open, and I can." She swallowed hard. "That's a lot of pressure for a coat and a dress." "Then take the pressure off," he said. "Just have dinner with me tonight." "No shopping, no favors, just us." She hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere with real food and no menus," he said. "You'll just have to trust me." "I barely know you," she said, though her voice was softer now. "I know," he said. "But you will." They left the boutique with her dress in a garment bag and a driver already waiting. This time the car wasn't sleek black, it was deep navy with a monogrammed crest on the door. Harley nearly tripped over the curb when she saw it. "You own this?" she asked. "No," Harris said, holding the door for her, "but the man who does owes me a favor." The restaurant was hidden. No sign, just a narrow entryway between a florist and a bookstore. Inside, it opened into a warm, candlelit space with low ceilings and exposed brick. A chef greeted Harris by name and led them to a table tucked in a corner with velvet chairs and a single flickering candle. They were served without ordering handmade pasta, roasted lamb, a red wine that tasted older than Harley's entire college debt. "I've never been somewhere like this in my life," she whispered after tasting the dessert, something chocolate and impossible. "Then it's about time," Harris said, sitting back. "Tell me something about you, not the resume version." She hesitated. "I used to paint," she said finally. "Abstracts. I thought I'd be an artist, but then rent happened." "Why'd you stop?" "I didn't have time," she said. "And when I did, I didn't have space or materials or energy." "Would you do it again?" She looked at him. "Why do you care?" "Because when you talk about it, your whole face changes," he said. "That's worth noticing." She said nothing for a while. Her chest was tight in a strange, unfamiliar way. Like the part of her that had always been braced for disappointment didn't know what to do with someone who simply listened. "Your turn," she said finally. "Tell me something real." He leaned forward. "My father died when I was 21. I took over the company 3 days after the funeral. Everyone thought I was too young. They weren't wrong." She blinked. "You've never told anyone that before, have you?" "Not someone who didn't have a stake in the answer." There was a silence between them then, but it wasn't awkward, it was full. weighted with things neither of them had expected to say but somehow had. As they stood to leave, Harris reached for her hand. "Can I drop you home?" She hesitated. "You don't have to, I want to." The ride back was slower. The city lights blurred past the windows, and Harley felt something shift, not between them, within her. When they reached her building, she turned to him. "This isn't what I expected," she said. "Me either," he replied. She started to open the door, but his voice stopped her. "Harley," she turned. "I'm not trying to impress you," he said quietly. "I'm trying to know you." Her throat tightened. She didn't respond, just nodded and slipped out of the car. When she turned back, he was still watching her. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, not from exhaustion this time, but because something inside her had just cracked open, and she didn't know what was going to come out. The sound of footsteps in the corridor pulled Harley out of her sketchbook. She quickly shoved it beneath a stack of bills before opening the door to her tiny apartment. "Package," the delivery guy said, holding out a long, rectangular box wrapped in matte navy paper with a silver ribbon. She hadn't ordered anything. "Thanks," she replied, confused, and shut the door. The card attached was handwritten in firm, slanted letters. "Thought you might need a proper place to put your brushes again." Inside was a hand-carved wooden case, each compartment lined with velvet and filled with new paintbrushes, flat, round, fan, filbert, and a fresh set of professional acrylics. Nestled in the bottom was a simple note: "Start again." Harley's heart was thudding in her chest before she even realized she was holding her breath. She hadn't told anyone about the brushes she'd thrown away during the move last year. She hadn't told anyone she missed painting out loud until that dinner. She called him. "I got the box," she said when he answered. "I hoped you would. I didn't ask for this." "You didn't have to." There was a pause. She sat down slowly on the arm of her couch, still holding the lid. "I haven't painted in over a year, Harris. I know. What if I'm not any good anymore? Then you'll be bad for a while, and then you'll get better." She didn't say anything for a long moment. "I don't know what you're doing," she said finally, her voice low. "I'm not trying to fix you," he replied. "I just want to see who you are when no one's forcing you to shrink." 3 days later, he invited her to a gala. "Why?" she asked. "I'm being honored for a tech initiative," he said. "It's a long speech, dry canapes, and enough photographers to make a forest weep. I don't want to go alone." She hesitated. "You're asking me to walk into a ballroom full of billionaires and celebrities." "Not as a prop," he said. "As the woman I'm seeing." She blinked. "We're seeing each other, are you not?" he asked. She couldn't help it. She laughed. "You're impossible." "That's a yes, it's a maybe." The dress arrived 2 hours before his driver. Sleek black silk off the shoulder with a slit-up one leg that made her blush. A note was tucked in with it. "Wear this if you want to make half the room jealous." He met her at the car, wearing a tuxedo that made him look dangerously elegant. When she stepped out, his eyes swept over her with a reverence that made her skin burn. "You're going to ruin me," he said quietly. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, champagne, and people who spoke in industry headlines. Harley stayed close to Harris's side, her fingers grazing his sleeve as he introduced her to venture capitalists, software pioneers, and women in glittering gowns who barely hid their curiosity. "Where did you two meet?" one asked, voice sugary and sharp. "On the street," Harley said, lifting her chin. "He gave me his coat." The woman blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "She was freezing," Harris added, completely unfazed. "I've been trying to warm her up ever since." Later, when the speeches began, Harley slipped away to the balcony for air. The skyline glittered below, and the chill felt steadier than the champagne in her system. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt him. "You handled them well," he said, stepping beside her. "I'm not sure they knew what to make of me." "They weren't supposed to." She turned to him. "You don't care what they think." "I care what you think." Her breath caught. "I'm not used to this," she said. "Any of it, you, the clothes. The way people look at me when I'm with you." He stepped closer. "I don't care if you're in a silk dress or paint-streaked jeans. I care that you look at me like I'm not the sum of my bank account." She didn't respond, not with words. But she reached up and touched the lapel of his jacket, her fingers brushing the crisp edge. He leaned in, slow, as if waiting for her to change her mind. She didn't. The kiss was quiet, but it cracked something open inside her. Not fireworks, something deeper, something steady. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You scare me," he whispered. "Why?" "Because I don't know how to want something without owning it, but I don't want to own you, I just want to be near you." She closed her eyes. "Then stay." He did. They left the gala early, his hand warm on the small of her back as the driver pulled up to the curb. On the ride home, Harley leaned against the window, watching the city blur past. "Do you always do this?" she asked quietly. "Do what? Give people the world?" He turned his head toward her. "Only when I think they've already earned it." She didn't answer. But she reached over and took his hand, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was bracing for something to fall apart. Harley stood in the elevator of Harris's penthouse building, her hands wrapped around a sketch pad she hadn't touched in months before him. The glass walls gave a full view of the skyline, but she couldn't pull her eyes away from her reflection, hair swept back, lips still painted from the art exhibit they'd just returned from, eyes wide with something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Hope. He'd surprised her with the exhibit, tucked in a converted warehouse in Tribeca, filled with contemporary pieces from artists she'd only studied in textbooks. He'd walked beside her in silence, letting her linger as long as she wanted in front of each canvas. When she stopped at a bold piece awash in reds and golds, he leaned in and whispered, "That one reminds me of your work." Now, as the elevator slowed, she felt the weight of what they hadn't said yet pressing against her spine. The doors opened into the penthouse, warm light spilling across marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. Harris stood near the fireplace, his tie loosened and his jacket already off. He turned as she stepped in. "You didn't have to bring that," he said, nodding to the sketch pad. "I wanted to," she replied, setting it down on the coffee table. "I started drawing again last night," his brow lifted slightly. "Yeah, just lines, shapes, but it felt different this time, like I wasn't trying to be perfect, just honest." He walked over and brushed a thumb over her cheek. "That's all I ever wanted from you, just you." She swallowed and glanced out the window. "I've been waiting for the catch, Harris, for the moment you realize I don't belong in your world. That I'm not polished enough or pedigreed enough to stand next to you." "I already realized that," he said, and her breath caught. Then he added, "And I couldn't care less. You think I'm drawn to you because you fit some mold? I've been surrounded by curated people my whole life. What I want is real." She stepped back slightly. "I don't know how to be in this kind of relationship, this fast, this intense. It's like you broke open a door I didn't know was locked." He nodded. "That's how it feels for me too." She looked at him, really looked. "You built this empire before most people figured out how to pay rent, but you never took time for yourself, did you?" He sat on the couch, his hands clasped. "I didn't know how. I thought building something would make me feel like I'd earned peace, but it didn't. It just made me lonelier." Harley sat beside him. "And now I want something I can't design or control, someone who challenges me, who sees through the polished surface." She rested her head against his shoulder. "You don't scare me, Harris, but what we're building, that does. Because I don't want to lose myself in it." "You won't," he said. "Not with me." Silence stretched between them, but it felt full, not fragile. Then Harris stood and disappeared down the hallway. When he returned, he held a black leather portfolio. "What's that?" she asked as he opened it. He handed her a sheet. It was a proposal an artist in residence program, funded by Pierce Innovations, full backing, open to underrepresented voices in the art world. Her name was printed at the top. She looked up, stunned. "You wrote this?" "I drafted it after that night you told me about painting," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should show it to you. I didn't want you to think I was trying to fix something that wasn't broken." Her throat tightened. "You want me to run it. I want you to lead it, shape it. Use your eye, your instincts build something that matters." She laid the paper down slowly. "You're giving me a platform. I'm offering it," he said. "You don't have to take it." She stood and walked to the window, the city pulsing below. "You know what's wild? I always thought I'd have to become someone else to be taken seriously, that I'd have to become colder, sharper. But here I am in your penthouse with messy sketches in my bag and paint under my nails." He joined her at the window. "You don't need to become anyone else. You're already exactly who you need to be." She turned to him, her voice barely audible. I'm terrified of how much I feel for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a small silver button. "This fell off your coat the night we met. I kept it." She stared at it, stunned. "I didn't know why," he continued. "But now I do. That night changed everything for me. I didn't expect to stop on that street. I didn't expect you." She took it from his palm. "And I didn't expect to trust someone like this." He took her hands. "I've built companies. I've bought skyscrapers. But standing in the cold with you that night, that was the first time I felt like I had something worth holding on to." Tears welled in her eyes. He stepped back and reached inside his jacket again. This time he pulled out a ring. Not enormous, not flashy, but elegant, with a subtle curve of rose gold and a single oval diamond. She stared, breath locked in her chest. "I don't want to wait for a perfect time," he said. "I want to build a life with you now, one where we both get to create, to grow, to be completely ourselves." "Will you marry me?" Harley's heart slammed against her ribs. Her vision blurred. She nodded, unable to speak. Then whispered, "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, it wasn't like a finale, it was a beginning. Outside, the city kept humming. But inside that penthouse, two people who never expected each other stood wrapped in something far rarer than fortune. Love, uncaged and unexpected. And finally, real. The wind off the Amalfi Coast teased Harley's hair as she stepped barefoot onto the balcony of the villa Harris had rented for their honeymoon. The sea stretched wide and endless before her, the sky tinged with the last blush of orange. A string quartet played somewhere in the distance, live music from a neighboring estate, soft enough to feel like a secret. Behind her, Harris's voice broke the quiet. "How did I get this lucky?" She turned. He stood in the open doorway, sleeves rolled up, top buttons undone, watching her like she was more breathtaking than the view. "I was going to ask you the same thing," she said. He walked over, lacing his fingers through hers without a word. They stood there, hand in hand, letting the silence settle around them, not awkward, not uncertain, just full of everything words couldn't reach. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I still feel like I'm dreaming." "You're not," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But I don't blame you." "The last few weeks have been a lot," she nodded. "Planning a wedding in 3 weeks was borderline criminal." "You pulled it off," he said. "That gallery space was perfect. It was your idea. You made it beautiful." Harley smiled, remembering the ceremony barefoot on the marble floor of a restored Parisian art gallery, surrounded by canvases from artists they both admired. There had been no flower arch, no matching bridesmaids, no assigned seats. Just vows whispered between them like promises only they understood. She exhaled. "I never thought I could have this, a life that's mine, fully mine." Harris leaned on the railing beside her. "You didn't have it before because you were too busy surviving. Now you're building, creating." She turned to him. "You mean we are?" He nodded. "We are." There was a pause before Harley said, "Do you ever miss it? The chase? The next deal, the next acquisition?" He looked out over the ocean. "I thought I would, but I've built enough. It's time I start living in what I've created." She smiled. "So no more billion-dollar meetings at dawn, only if you're beside me when I take the call." He pulled her closer, her back against his chest, as they watched the ocean change color. Later that night, Harley stood in front of a canvas set up in the corner of the villa's sunroom. Her brush moved slowly, deliberately. She wasn't painting for approval or to fill a space. She was painting because something inside her was finally quiet enough to speak. Harris entered with a glass of wine, setting it beside her. He didn't interrupt, just stood behind her, one hand resting lightly on her waist as she worked. "I booked the space," he said softly. "For the first exhibit." She glanced back. "Already? You were ready before you realized." She turned fully, brush in hand. "You're sure you want to launch this artist program under your name?" "No," he said. "I want it under yours." Her breath caught. "You're the heart of it," he continued. "You see people who haven't been seen." "That's what this whole thing is about." She nodded slowly. "Then let's do it. Together." The following month, the program launched with a flood of submissions. Harley reviewed every entry herself, choosing artists who reminded her of who she used to be, people with raw talent and no platform. She coached them, mentored them, gave them space to breathe. The night of the first showcase, she stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by paintings and sculptures and installations all born from voices that had been ignored for too long. Harris stood beside her, his hand steady on her back as guests swirled around them, eyes wide with admiration. A woman approached, young and nervous, her fingers ink-stained. "Miss Grant," Harley turned. "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you." "No one's ever given me a real chance before." Harley smiled, her chest tight. "You gave yourself the chance." "I just opened the door." The woman nodded and drifted away, leaving Harley staring at the piece the artist had created, a chaotic explosion of color and movement that felt like a scream turned into music. Harris leaned in. "You're changing lives." She shook her head. "We are." That night, after the gallery emptied and the lights dimmed, Harley and Harris walked through the space alone. She stopped in front of her own piece, tucked in a corner without a placard. Just brushstrokes, bold and vulnerable, the first thing she'd painted since the day he gave her that box of brushes. Harris slid his arms around her from behind. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I never wanted the world. I wanted to give it to someone who would do something real with it." She turned in his arms. "And I never wanted to be saved. I just wanted someone who wouldn't flinch when I showed them who I really was." His forehead rested against hers. "We're not perfect," he said. "But we're real." "And that's enough," she whispered. He kissed her, not with urgency but with assurance, with the quiet certainty of someone who knew, finally, that he wasn't alone, and neither was she. They took the long way home that night, walking hand in hand through the city they'd both once felt too small in and too far from. The streets weren't silent, but they felt like theirs. Eventually, they'd return to the penthouse and to the life they were building. A life filled with art and purpose and late-night takeout when the world felt too loud. A life where they chose each other every day not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in the quiet that followed, wrapped in each other's arms beneath linen sheets and open windows, they finally slept, not braced for the next storm, but anchored in each other, home, forever.